Morning, John.
Morning, Brian.
You're going to talk to us about Pope Benedict and Cardinal George Pell.
That's right. Pope Benedict resigned, he resigned when he was Pope, which is most unusual. No Pope had resigned for 500 or 600 years. And that was at a time when there was difficulties in the papacy, and so that happened at that time. And there was a time when there was three popes making them to be popes, and that was a terrible time. And it was dealt with. One then became pope and based in Rome. There was one in Avignon in France. Because the secular crowd, these kings and all the rest of it, had more influence than they should have. They should be just like the rest of us, and of practicing their Catholic faith and not trying to order things about. And that's what they were at. Anyway, Pope Benedict resigned, and then Pope Francis become. He taught some other cardinal. From Milan might be the next pope and would be traditional, but Pope Francis has adopted a different attitude and has caused confusion in the church. But in any event, suffice to say that Pope Benedict died and has been much mourned because his contribution was very good. He was a great theologian and writer and understood all the ins and outs. He had been this, what they call I won't say Secretary of State or whatever they call it, that's next to the Pope nearly. He's and he was that during Pope John Paul II, and they really got on very well together because Pope John Paul II was a great pope. He helped in Poland for the communists that had nearly ruined that country, and persecuted Catholics and Christians. So he managed for them to go, and not alone go from there, but go from other countries where the rule was not suitable for those people in those countries. President Reagan in America was a great help as well with the Pope, and apparently Mrs. Thatcher in Britain. She got some credit for support and that type of thing, and but the Pope John Paul II was great, and and when Pope Benedict was the Secretary of State or whatever they call it, he was very good and influential, and he wasn't expecting to be elected Pope, and he was very good, but the media. Once a person is traditional and he supported the Latin Rite Mass and all this type of stuff, he brought it back in because it's a great way to celebrate Holy Mass with the priest, the universal language in the Latin. So he did a lot of good, which Pope Francis, funny enough, has undermined. Now, but we're talking about Pope Benedict, and then Cardinal George Pell was interviewed. He was unjustly jailed under false charges of two individuals that said they were in the sacristy, that they were interfered with by Pope John when he was Archbishop of Melbourne, and it couldn't happen. One of them died, and he had suffered from drug addiction, but he told his mother before he died that there was no truth in it. But nonetheless, Cardinal George Pell, he was very influential in Rome. He was helping to sort of straighten out the financial affairs there, and so he was making enemies. But in any event, he had been found innocent of this. There was no truth. It had been dismissed. But for some reason or another, the police started more investigations and started believing this individual that made out he was abused when there was no evidence whatsoever. And Pope and Cardinal George Pell denied it completely, but in any event he was found guilty and then jailed. He spent over a year, 400 days in jail. and was in solitary confinement, but he was able to have the use of a television apparently, and he wasn't allowed to celebrate Mass, which is a very important thing of a priest or anybody that's a priest, that's to be able to celebrate Mass every day. So in any event, he was, God help him, he was found innocent then by their High Court subsequently. One court in, but the High Court, or whatever they call it there was, he should have never been convicted. I don't think he looked for compensation or anything like that, which we would be entitled to do. But he was interviewed, and he has written books about his time in the jail, and he was a great force for good. And he was, as a matter of fact, there's a chap in Ireland that has the Familia Sanctae or something for the family. He's spiritual, and it's a very good business that he has. He was a writer in the Catholic Voice newspaper, and very good, John Lacken. And funny enough, he had a shop. He's a good few children, and they're all, one of them has gone on to be a priest in the Latin Rite, and he's living now near Limerick, and there's a Latin Mass there, the sovereign priests or whatever they call themselves in Limerick, and he goes there. But in any event, in 2015, he was at Mass in Knock. He was living in Knock, and he was at Mass, and his wife told him, "Oh, there's a Mass going over on the side altar in the Latin Rite." So he said there was already, and he went over, and he went up to the front, and the priest that was saying the Mass said to him, could he serve Mass? And funny enough, he had done a course that he could, and he did, and it turned out the priest was the private secretary of Cardinal George Pell, who was actually in Knock at the time. Now, that didn't come out, it came out from John Lacken. And the reason that he spoke about it was that there was a friend in the shop. He thought they were gone, that they weren't going to come, but then the big car pulled up outside the shop. He had a shop like in souvenirs and all the rest of it in Knock, trying to make a living. And Cardinal George Pell and his private secretary come in, and the friend took a photograph. So I saw a photograph of John Lacken and Cardinal George Pell and his secretary in 2015. So that was a little ingredient, but Cardinal George Pell was a great believer in the Latin Rite Mass, and so that's why he's honoured by what would I call it, Catholics, traditional Catholics, which like the Latin Mass, and I certainly like it myself because that's what I was brought up in when I was young, and even up till I was 30. But then it changed, and it's gone now. There's not many people practicing their Catholic faith as was, because the message is not the same. The altar rails were taken out. The priest faces the congregation. He always faces the tabernacle. So I think he should still face the tabernacle, even if he was saying the Mass in English. But certainly the Latin Rite is the one that was that Pope Benidict and Cardinal George Pell supported. Whereas this present man in Rome, the Pope, is singing from a different hymn sheet. He's into the climate change. He's into stuff that really, as Catholics, we believe that God created the world and rested on the seventh day, the Sabbath, and that when it's finished, that it'll be finished by God as well. And really, what people are doing at the moment with all these serious issues of abortion and same-sex marriage, euthanasia, assisted suicide, mutilation of the young, and other evils, and trying to indoctrinate the young children now with the homosexual, lesbian agenda and all that is not good. So these are things that are definitely causing trouble in the church, and should be spoken about by the bishops, and that people that inflict that on mankind need to repent, because they're in grave danger of eternal damnation. So this is the great business of Pope Benedict and Cardinal George Pell. They spoke the truth, and funny enough, the truth sets you free. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks very much, John.
Thanks.